The brush sweeps gently across the ancient soil, revealing a glimmer of something hidden for millennia. The archaeologist's hands tremble, not from exhaustion, but from the sheer weight of the moment. As the dust settles, an intricately carved seal emerges, its symbols staring back like whispers from a world long gone. This isn't just an artifact, it's a fragment of the Indus Valley Civilization, one of history's most advanced yet enigmatic societies. Imagine a culture so sophisticated it built grid-planned cities with sewage systems over 4,000 years ago, while much of the world was still grappling with rudimentary villages. And yet, despite their brilliance, they vanished without a trace, leaving behind a script that still defies translation. What happened to these people? How could a civilization so advanced simply disappear into the shadows of time? The Indus Valley isn't just another chapter in history, it's a riddle wrapped in mystery. Picture bustling streets lined with towering brick structures, artisans crafting delicate jewelry, and traders exchanging goods across vast distances. This was a society that thrived in harmony, with no evidence of war or kings, yet their achievements rivaled those of Egypt and Mesopotamia. But here's the twist: their writing remains unreadable, their rituals unclear, and their downfall unexplained. Were they undone by climate change, invasion, or something even more unexpected? Every artifact we uncover only deepens the puzzle, pulling us further into a story that feels half-told. Today, we're stepping into the shoes of those archaeologists, piecing together the fragments of a forgotten world. Over the next few minutes, we'll unravel 30 of the most compelling mysteries of the Indus Valley, secrets buried in their symbols, their cities, and their sudden silence. You'll discover how their innovations still baffle modern scholars and why their legacy challenges everything we thought we knew about ancient civilizations. This isn't just a history lesson, it's a journey into the unknown where every clue leads to another question. So lean in close, because the Indus Valley has waited 4,000 years to share its secrets. And trust me, you won't believe what they've been hiding. Among the greatest roadblocks to understanding the Indus Valley Civilization is their cryptic script, tiny, elegant symbols etched onto soapstone seals, pottery, and copper tablets. Over 4,000 inscriptions have been discovered, each one a silent conversation from a lost world. Some scholars argue these markings represent a full-fledged language, while others insist they're merely religious or commercial symbols. The truth, after more than a century of study, we still don't know for certain. What makes this script so maddeningly elusive? For starters, the average inscription is frustratingly short, just 4 or 5 characters long. Imagine trying to decode an entire language from nothing but scattered words like apple or river without context. Even the longest known inscription, found on a board near the city of Dholavira, contains just 26 symbols, nowhere near enough to reveal grammar or meaning. Then there's the problem of the Rosetta Stone effect. Ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs were finally deciphered thanks to the famed Rosetta Stone, which displayed the same text in 3 scripts. But the Indus Valley left no such key. Without a bilingual inscription or even a clear descendant language, modern linguists are working in the dark. Computers have been thrown at the problem, running complex statistical analyses to detect patterns. Some algorithms suggest the script shares features with ancient Dravidian languages, while others argue it's closer to early Sanskrit, yet no theory has gained universal acceptance. The symbols resist even the most advanced code-breaking techniques, almost as if they were designed to guard their secrets. But perhaps the most haunting question isn't just how to read the script, but why it was used at all. The seals, often depicting animals like unicorns and bulls, were likely used in trade, stamped onto goods like ancient barcodes. Yet the uniformity of the symbols across vast distances hints at something deeper, a shared system of communication, maybe even literature or laws now lost to time. Were these marks invoices for grain shipments, or fragments of epic poems until the script yields its secrets. The voices of the Indus Valley remain just out of reach, their stories locked in symbols we can see but cannot hear. Walking through the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro is like stepping into a blueprint of the future 4,000 years ahead of its time. The city's streets run in perfect right angles, a grid so precise it could rival modern Manhattan. But here's what stuns archaeologists. This wasn't a fluke. Harappa, Rakhigarhi, Dholavira, every major Indus Valley city shared this same meticulous design. And the secret ingredient, standardization. Their bricks weren't just clay and straw, they were mathematical marvels baked to uniform ratios of 4:2:1. Imagine builders across hundreds of miles with no phones or blueprints crafting identical bricks down to the centimeter. How? That's just the first of many puzzles. Then there's the drainage, a network of covered channels lining every street, funneling wastewater away from homes and into the outskirts. While ancient Rome gets credit for its aqueducts, the Indus Valley had underground sewage systems 1,000 years earlier. Even their homes were engineered for efficiency, with courtyards that funneled rainwater into reservoirs and chutes that connected directly to the main drains. But here's the kicker, this wasn't elite technology. Even the humblest neighborhoods had access to clean water and waste disposal. In an era when most civilizations were piling mud into huts, the Indus Valley was democratizing urban living. The real head-scratcher, though, is the coordination. These cities weren't just similar, they were practically carbon copies, despite being separated by distances as vast as London to Paris. No evidence of central rule, no palaces, no grand temples, just a shared vision executed with eerie precision. Some theorists suggest a guild of master planners traveling between settlements like ancient consultants. Others point to trade networks spreading not just goods but ideas. But with no surviving records, we're left guessing how they pulled off this Bronze Age urban revolution. One thing's certain, their legacy isn't just in the bricks they left behind, but in the haunting question of what humanity could achieve if only we worked together as seamlessly as they did. Rising from the dust of Mohenjo-Daro is a structure so puzzling it could rewrite our understanding of ancient spirituality, the Great Bath. This enormous brick-lined tank, measuring nearly 12 meters long and 7 meters wide, sits at the heart of the city like an aquatic altar. Two staircases descend into its carefully waterproofed basin, while surrounding rooms hint at rituals too mysterious to reconstruct. But what exactly transpired here? The theories are as deep as the bath itself. Some archaeologists argue this was a sacred space for purification rites, a Bronze Age baptismal site where water held divine power. The bath's precise orientation and sophisticated drainage system suggest ceremonies far more complex than mere hygiene. Similar tanks appear in later Hindu temples, used for ritual cleansing before worship. Could this be the earliest known predecessor? Others push back, noting the absence of religious iconography or altars nearby. Without inscriptions or artifacts directly linking the bath to gods, the spiritual theory remains tantalizing but unproven. Then there's the practical camp. The bath's design, with its sloping floor and side channels, resembles ancient Greek pools used for athletic training. Could this have been an elite social hub where Mohenjo-Daro's citizens gathered to swim or even compete? It's a compelling thought, except for one gaping hole. No other Indus Valley city has anything remotely similar. If swimming was culturally significant, why is there zero evidence beyond this single site? Perhaps the most intriguing proposal comes from researchers studying ancient astronomy. The bath's alignment matches celestial patterns visible 4,000 years ago. Some suggest it functioned as a giant reflecting pool, capturing moonlight or star positions for calendrical calculations. Others whisper of water divination rituals where priests interpreted ripples like sacred texts. The truth may be even more profound. Unlike Egyptian pyramids or Mesopotamian ziggurats, the Great Bath lacks obvious grandeur. Its power lies in subtlety, the way its bricks fit without mortar, how its stillness mirrors the Indus people's obsession with order. Maybe this wasn't just a tank, but a liquid metaphor for their entire civilization, engineered perfection hiding untold depth. Until we find clearer evidence, the Great Bath remains a silent enigma, its waters still holding secrets we've only begun to fathom. Buried beneath the ruins of Harappa, archaeologists unearthed something startling, not gold or weapons, but piles upon piles of nearly identical clay pots. Each one bore the same curvature, the same thickness, even the same fingerprints pressed into the clay by hands that worked with uncanny consistency. This wasn't just skilled craftsmanship, it was evidence of something revolutionary. 4,000 years before Henry Ford's assembly lines, the Indus Valley Civilization had mastered the art of mass production. Take their stone beads, for example, tiny cylinders of carnelian, agate, and lapis lazuli, each drilled with holes so precise they could still be threaded today. Microscopic analysis reveals something extraordinary. The drilling marks are identical across beads found hundreds of miles apart, as if the same tool and technique were used from Mohenjo-Daro to distant Lothal. But here's the twist, these stones weren't locally sourced. The carnelian came from Gujarat, the lapis from Afghanistan. Yet somehow, artisans across the civilization were producing near-perfect replicas, as if working from the same invisible blueprint. Then there's the mystery of the weights. Excavations have turned up thousands of cubical stone weights, so uniform they deviate by less than 1% across the entire Indus Valley. A weight found in Harappa would balance perfectly with one dug up in Dholavira, 800 kilometers away. This wasn't just convenience, it was a system. Traders from Mesopotamia wrote of receiving goods from the Indus Valley, measured to the smallest grain, suggesting an economy built on trust and precision. But how did they achieve such consistency without modern tools? The answer might lie in their workshops. Archaeologists have uncovered specialized production zones, areas where raw materials were prepped in one corner, shaped in another, and finished in a third. Some sites even show evidence of molds used to mass-produce figurines and ornaments. It's as if they'd cracked the code of division of labor millennia before it became textbook economics. Perhaps most puzzling is what this reveals about their society. Mass production implies more than skill. It demands organization, communication, and a shared standard of excellence. Unlike Egypt or Mesopotamia, where elites controlled production for monuments and temples, the Indus Valley's standardized goods appear everywhere, from grand stores to modest homes. This was precision for the people, not just the powerful. Yet for all their innovation, we still don't know who orchestrated this system. No king's edict survived, no manager's records. Just the objects themselves, silent witnesses to a civilization that turned consistency into an art form. Every pot, every bead, every weight is a clue to a question we're still trying to answer. How did a Bronze Age society achieve what many modern factories still struggle with: perfection at scale? One of the most haunting mysteries of the Indus Valley Civilization isn't how they thrived, but how they vanished. Around 1900 BCE, their bustling cities began emptying, their trade networks faltering, their streets falling silent. Unlike other ancient collapses marked by ruins and ash, this decline feels eerily quiet, as if an entire civilization simply walked away. What could have caused such a meticulous society to unravel? The theories are as complex as the civilization itself, each one peeling back another layer of this 4,000-year-old enigma. For decades, the leading explanation pointed to climate change. The Gagga-Hakra River, once the lifeblood of the region, may have dried up or shifted course, turning fertile lands into dust. Satellite images reveal ancient riverbeds snaking beneath modern deserts, hinting at a catastrophic drought. Recent geological studies add weight to this theory. Sediment cores show drastic drops in monsoon rainfall right around the time the cities were abandoned. Picture a civilization built on water, its granaries and baths reliant on predictable floods, suddenly facing years of unrelenting aridity. Crops would fail, trade routes wither, and people would have no choice but to disperse. But not everyone's convinced. Some scholars argue the so-called Aryan invasion theory, once widely accepted, has crumbled under modern scrutiny. Early excavations found scattered skeletons in Mohenjo-Daro, fueling speculation of violent conquest. Yet newer research reveals no widespread destruction layers, no evidence of mass conflict. Those skeletons, they're clustered in a single area, likely victims of flooding or disease, not war. Linguistic and genetic studies further complicate the picture. While Sanskrit-speaking groups did migrate into the region later, there's no clear evidence they caused the Indus Valley's collapse. If invaders didn't topple this civilization, what did? A darker possibility lurks in the ruins: disease. The Indus city's dense populations and advanced water systems could have been their undoing. Stagnant pools in failing drainage networks might have bred malaria or cholera, while trade caravans carried pathogens across regions. Some researchers point to abrupt shifts in burial practices, more graves, less cremation, as potential evidence of epidemics. Without written records, we can't know for sure, but history shows how quickly civilizations can buckle under invisible threats. Now, here's where it gets even stranger. Recent excavations in places like Rakhigarhi suggest the decline wasn't uniform. Some cities faded gradually, while others were abandoned almost overnight. There's evidence of temporary resettlement, as if people returned to salvage what they could before leaving for good. This patchwork collapse hints at multiple stressors, not just one disaster, but a perfect storm of environmental, social, and economic pressures. The most radical theory: they didn't collapse at all, they transformed. Artifacts show Indus Valley motifs persisting in later cultures, their craftsmanship evolving rather than disappearing. Perhaps what we call a collapse was actually a dispersal, as communities adapted by going mobile, trading urban life for smaller villages. After all, their greatest legacy wasn't their cities, but their ideas, standardized weights, ceramic techniques, even spiritual symbols that echo in South Asian cultures today. The truth may lie somewhere in between. A civilization this sophisticated doesn't vanish by accident. It fades when too many threads pull loose at once. Whether by drought, disease, or simply the weight of their own complexity, the people of the Indus Valley didn't just disappear. They became ghosts in their own land, leaving behind clues we're still struggling to decipher. And that's the real mystery, not how they fell, but how much of them might still linger, hidden in plain sight. Of all the Indus Valley's rediscovered cities, none baffles archaeologists quite like Dholavira. Perched on an island in what's now the Rann of Kutch, this metropolis didn't just survive, it thrived in one of the harshest environments on Earth. While other ancient civilizations clustered around mighty rivers, Dholavira's builders mastered the art of squeezing life from sand, creating a water management system so advanced it could teach modern cities a lesson. The secret lies in their reservoirs, 16 monumental tanks carved into the bedrock, capable of holding nearly 300,000 cubic meters of water. That's enough to fill 100 Olympic-sized swimming pools. During monsoon rains, an intricate network of channels would funnel every precious drop into these storage systems, with sluice gates controlling flow like Bronze Age plumbing. But here's what really stuns engineers: their filtration system. Layers of sand and gravel purified water before it reached homes, while overflow channels prevented flooding. This wasn't just survival, it was hydroengineering perfected 4,000 years before the term existed. Then there's the signboard. High above the city gates, 10 massive symbols, each nearly 40 centimeters tall, were once mounted on wood, greeting visitors with what might be the world's first public signage. The letters have long since crumbled, but the slots where they were displayed remain, taunting us with questions. Was this a declaration of the city's name? A royal proclamation without the key to their script, we're left staring at empty grooves where a message once shouted across millennia. What truly appends historical timelines, though, is Dholavira's architecture. While contemporaries like Mesopotamia built with mud bricks that crumbled over time, Dholavira's structures used stone masonry so precise that some walls still stand 5 meters tall. Their stadium-like ceremonial ground could seat thousands, with acoustics that carried whispers across its length. Most astonishing, the city was rebuilt 7 distinct times, each iteration more sophisticated than the last. This isn't just some abandoned ruin, it's a time capsule of urban resilience. While other Bronze Age societies rose and fell with their rivers, Dholavira's people turned scarcity into innovation. Their legacy whispers a provocative idea. Maybe civilization's earliest chapters weren't written solely along fertile banks, but also in the stubborn, brilliant refusal to let deserts have the last word. Among the thousands of seals unearthed from the Indus Valley, one tiny soapstone carving stands apart: the Pashupati Seal. At first glance, it seems simple, a horned figure seated cross-legged, surrounded by animals. But peer closer, and you're staring into one of archaeology's fiercest debates. This single artifact could rewrite everything we thought we knew about the origins of Hindu worship, challenging timelines that stretch back millennia. The figure's posture is unmistakable: legs folded in what yogis would recognize as Mulabandhasana, a meditative pose still practiced today. His arms rest lightly on bent knees, fingers splayed in a gesture eerily similar to modern mudras. Most striking are the horns, curling upward like a crescent moon crowning his head. To many scholars, this is unmistakably an early form of Shiva, the Hindu god later known as Pashupati, lord of beasts. The animals surrounding him are tiger, elephant, rhinoceros, and buffalo, mirror Shiva's later associations with wild creatures. If this interpretation holds, it would push evidence of Shiva worship back over 2,000 years earlier than currently accepted, appending religious histories. But not everyone agrees. Skeptics argue the seal might depict a tribal shaman, not a deity. The crossed legs could represent not yoga, but a seated posture common in hunting cultures. The horns might just be an elaborate headdress, and those animals, perhaps symbols of clans rather than divine attributes. Without accompanying text, we're left projecting later beliefs onto ambiguous imagery. Then there's the third camp, those who see the figure as something entirely alien. His face bears 3 distinct projections, possibly representing a trident or multiple faces, both unknown in later Hindu iconography. Some even suggest that animals aren't literal creatures but constellations, making the seal an astronomical chart rather than a religious one. What makes this debate so explosive isn't just the seal itself, but what it implies about cultural continuity. If this is truly proto-Shiva, it suggests Hinduism's roots run far deeper than written records indicate, with traditions surviving orally across 40 centuries. But if it's unrelated, we're forced to ask, how did nearly identical imagery emerge independently 2 millennia later? The Pashupati Seal doesn't just depict a mysterious figure, it embodies the tension between archaeological evidence and historical assumptions, between what we can prove and what we feel must be true. Every new theory pulls at the threads of South Asia's spiritual tapestry, threatening to unravel timelines we once thought were set in stone. Scattered across Indus Valley excavation sites lie hundreds of small terracotta figures, women with wide hips, pronounced bellies, and sometimes even clearly depicted pregnancy. At first glance, they seem to shout fertility idol, but archaeologists warn against jumping to conclusions. These figurines, often crudely molded yet strikingly expressive, have sparked debates that cut to the heart of how we interpret ancient cultures through modern lenses. One school of thought sees divine symbolism in every curve. The exaggerated reproductive features, swollen breasts, broad child-bearing hips mirror later mother goddess figurines from Neolithic Europe to the Hindu Shakti tradition. Some researchers point to their frequent discovery in household contexts as evidence of domestic worship, perhaps talismans for safe childbirth or abundant harvests. The most elaborate specimens wear ornate headdresses, suggesting ritual significance. But here's the complication. Unlike Mesopotamian or Egyptian fertility deities, none of these figures appear in clearly religious settings like altars or temples. Without inscriptions or associated artifacts, the goddess theory remains speculative. An alternative interpretation casts these objects in a startlingly practical light: medical models. Archaeologist Jane McIntosh proposed they might have been teaching aids for midwives, their exaggerated anatomy demonstrating pregnancy progression. This would explain why some show fetuses in utero, a feature otherwise rare in ancient art. Comparative studies note similar didactic figurines in ancient Greece and Egypt, where birthing instructors used three-dimensional models. If correct, these could be the world's earliest known obstetrical tools, hinting at sophisticated healthcare knowledge passed down through generations. Then there's the mundane camp. Anthropologist Gregory Possehl observed that many figurines show wear patterns consistent with children's toys, smoothed edges from frequent handling, paint worn away by tiny fingers. In this view, they might simply be ancient dolls, their proportions reflecting cultural ideals of femininity rather than divine attributes. Supporting this, some Harappan sites yielded miniature furniture alongside the figures, suggesting play rather than ritual. But the most provocative theory comes from archaeologist Sherry Clark, who notes that many figurines were deliberately broken before burial. This intentional damage, often at the neck or waist, parallels later South Asian rituals where objects are killed to release their spiritual essence. Could these have been votive offerings, their destruction symbolizing the peril of childbirth? The answer may lie in between all these ideas. Ancient objects rarely served single purposes. A figurine could be a teaching tool by day, a sacred object by night, and a child's comfort in between. What makes these clay women truly remarkable isn't just their form, but their silence. Unlike the serene goddesses of later cultures, many Harappan figurines were expressions modern viewers might call exhausted or pained, realistic touches that humanize them across millennia. They remind us that behind every artifact lie lived experiences: the midwife guiding her student's hands, the mother clutching a charm, the child cradling a doll while her own mother labors nearby. In their unassuming simplicity, these figurines hold a truth more profound than any temple idol: the universal story of birth, preserved in fragile clay. In the dusty archives of ancient Mesopotamia, a scribe carefully presses a clay tablet with his stylus, recording the arrival of exotic goods from a distant land called Meluha: black wood, carnelian beads, and ivory so fine it must have come from elephants. For decades, scholars assumed this was just another mythical trading partner, until Indus Valley seals started turning up in Mesopotamian ruins. Not copies, not imitations, actual seals crafted in Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, lying 2,500 kilometers away in the ruins of Ur and Kish. This wasn't just trade, it was a Bronze Age supply chain spanning deserts, mountains, and open ocean. The logistics boggle the mind. Mesopotamian records describe Meluhan ships docking at their ports, but the Indus Valley sits landlocked today. Geological studies reveal the answer. Their coastline once extended far beyond modern Gujarat, with thriving ports like Lothal where dockyards aligned with tidal patterns. Archaeologists found Lothal's artificial brick dock still intact, capable of handling ships up to 30 meters long. Imagine vessels laden with Harappan gems and timber setting sail across the Arabian Sea, navigating by stars and currents to reach Oman's copper-rich shores. There, Amoni pottery has been found alongside Indus weights, proof of a trading hub where goods changed hands across cultures. But here's where the mystery deepens. For all their trade sophistication, the Indus people left no evidence of currency, no coins, no precious metal bars, not even standardized tokens. Mesopotamians used silver as money, Egyptians gold rings, yet Harappan merchants apparently traded through sheer accounting brilliance. Their uniform weights suggest a system based on value equivalencies, so many beads for so much grain, balanced perfectly on those cubical stone scales. Some theorists propose perishable materials like cloth or grain as currency, but why wouldn't other civilizations mention it? The most radical idea comes from economist Steve Lansing, who argues they might have pioneered something akin to a credit economy. Seals found in Mesopotamia often bear merchant marks but no royal insignia, hinting at private enterprise rather than state-controlled trade. If traders used seals as signatures on clay contracts, proto-bills of lading, they could have moved goods without physical money changing hands. It's a concept that wouldn't resurface until medieval banking, yet the absence of currency isn't the only puzzle. Indus seals in Mesopotamia often appear in elite contexts, buried with kings or sealed in temple storerooms. Meanwhile, Mesopotamian goods in the Indus Valley, like the rare lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, turn up in workshops, not tombs. This one-sided distribution suggests the trade wasn't equal. The Indus people might have been exporting finished luxuries while importing raw materials, turning craftsmanship into economic power. The real stunner, this network collapsed centuries before the cities did. By 1800 BCE, Meluhha vanishes from Mesopotamian records, yet Harappan cities lingered another 200 years. Did the trade web unravel first, starving the civilization of resources, or did they abandon global commerce to focus on survival? The seals hold their silence, their cryptic symbols guarding the secrets of history's first long-distance entrepreneurs. A people who moved mountains of goods across oceans, all without leaving behind a single coin. Of all the creatures stamped onto Indus Valley seals, none captivates modern eyes like the so-called unicorn, a mysterious beast depicted on over 60% of recovered artifacts. Unlike the graceful white unicorns of medieval legend, this one is stocky and bull-like with a single arched horn jutting from its forehead. The sheer repetition of this image is staggering, appearing thousands of times across hundreds of miles, yet its meaning remains as elusive as the mythical creature itself. Some scholars argue this is no fantasy beast, but a highly stylized aurochs, an ancient wild ox revered across early cultures. The curved horn could represent artistic shorthand, much like how Egyptian hieroglyphs simplified complex animals. Supporting this, a handful of seals show two horned bulls standing beside the unicorn, as if illustrating the same creature from different perspectives. But why exaggerate the single horn? One compelling theory ties it to worship. Ancient Near Eastern texts describe rituals where bulls were sometimes depicted with one gilded horn to signify divine status. Perhaps the unicorn wasn't a separate species at all, but a symbolic representation of sacred strength. Then there's the mythological camp. Comparisons arise with the Rigveda's mentions of one-horned beasts, or even Mesopotamian legends of celestial bulls. Could this image be the earliest known unicorn myth, predating later European tales by millennia? Intriguingly, no physical remains of one-horned animals have been found in the region. No skulls, no skeletal anomalies, making the biological explanation shaky at best. But the most radical theory rejects both literal and mythical interpretations entirely. Archaeologist Asko Parpola suggests the unicorn wasn't an animal at all, but a clan emblem, a corporate logo of sorts for powerful merchant families. The objects often placed before it, what some call feeders or incense burners, might actually be standardized weights or trade markers. In this reading, the seals functioned less as religious totems and more as Bronze Age business cards, their recurring motifs advertising a family's commercial identity across vast networks. What deepens the mystery is the unicorn's exclusivity. While other seals showcase elephants, rhinos, and tigers in dynamic poses, the unicorn is almost always shown in profile, static beside its enigmatic stand. This uniformity hints at rigid symbolic rules, as if the image carried a meaning so universally understood it needed no elaboration. Yet for all its repetition, not a single accompanying inscription gives us its name or significance. Perhaps the truth lies in the eyes of the ancient beholder. To a trader from Mesopotamia, the unicorn might have signaled trusted merchandise. To a priest, it could have embodied a water deity or cosmic protector. And to the artisan who carved it 1,000 times, it may simply have been the design that sells. One thing's certain: in a civilization that left no surviving myths, this hybrid creature stands as the closest thing we have to a shared cultural icon, a silent herald of beliefs we can glimpse but never fully hear. Beneath the orderly streets of the Indus Valley lies a burial mystery that defies every expectation. While Egypt's pharaohs rested in gold-filled pyramids and Mesopotamian kings were entombed with sacrificed servants, the Indus people left behind graves so understated they're almost invisible. No towering mausoleums, no treasure-laden chambers, just simple pits with a haunting inconsistency that keeps archaeologists awake at night. Some hold skeletons curled on their sides like sleeping children, accompanied by nothing more than a single clay pot. Others contain intricate jewelry, ivory combs, even mirrors of polished copper, suggesting reverence for the dead. But here's where it gets bizarre. Many graves are completely empty, meticulously dug and lined with bricks, yet never used. Were these symbolic memorials preparation for deaths that never came? The silence is deafening. Compare this to contemporary civilizations, and the contrast couldn't be starker. In the royal cemetery held piles of sacrificed retainers, their bodies arranged in elaborate death rituals. Egyptian mastabas overflowed with furniture, food, and even board games for the afterlife. Yet the Indus Valley's most elaborate burial, if you can call it that, is a woman in Harappa buried with a shell bracelet and a few beads. The absence of warrior graves or weapon offerings is equally striking. While Mesopotamian tombs bristled with daggers and axes, Indus graves contained tools for daily life: spindles, fishing hooks, and the occasional terracotta toy. This wasn't a society ignoring death. It was one confronting it with quiet pragmatism, or perhaps a belief system so different it's left no familiar traces. The real enigma isn't just what they buried, it's what's missing. After excavating over 1,000 graves, archaeologists have found zero evidence of royal burials. No grand necropolises, no crowned skeletons, not even a single inscription naming a ruler. For a civilization that built sewage systems and multi-story brick houses, this omission is staggering. How could an advanced, urbanized society function without kings or chieftains monumentalizing their power in death? Some speculate their leaders were cremated, their ashes scattered in rivers in a proto-Hindu tradition. Others propose a radical idea. Maybe they didn't have rulers as we understand them. The uniformity of their cities, the lack of palaces, and these restrained burials hint at something unprecedented. A complex civilization that thrived without centralized authority, where status wasn't displayed in death because it wasn't flaunted in life. Then there are the cenotaphs, those eerie, empty graves. Recent excavations in Rakhigarhi revealed clusters of unused brick-lined pits, some stacked like apartments for the non-existent dead. One theory suggests these were symbolic resting places for bodies lost at sea or in distant trade expeditions. Another posits they functioned like modern memorial benches, spaces to honor the missing without physical remains. The most poignant discovery, a group of child-sized empty graves arranged around a single occupied one, as if a community mourned multiple losses but only recovered one small body. What emerges from the soil isn't just a burial custom, but a philosophical fingerprint. While their contemporaries hoarded wealth for the afterlife, the Indus people seem to whisper a different credo through these graves: that memory needs no gold, that equality might extend beyond death, and that some legacies are woven into bricks and beads rather than carved into monuments. Their silence speaks volumes if only we could understand the language. Deep beneath the streets of Mohenjo-Daro, archaeologists uncovered something extraordinary: over 700 wells, some plunging 30 feet through brick-lined shafts to reach pure groundwater. That's more wells per square mile than any other ancient city, including Rome at its peak. But these weren't just pragmatic structures, their precise craftsmanship, each brick perfectly tapered to form smooth cylinders, hints at something beyond utility. When paired with the Great Bath's ritualistic aura and the intricate drainage systems weaving through every neighborhood, a tantalizing pattern emerges. The Indus Valley Civilization might have worshipped water itself. Consider the evidence. Unlike Mesopotamia, where temples dominated cityscapes, the most monumental Indus structures revolve around water management. The Great Bath's perfect proportions and isolation suggest ceremonial use, while smaller bathing platforms in Harappan homes imply private purification rites. Then there are the water temples, structures like those at Dholavira, where staircases descend into deep reservoirs as if inviting worshippers to commune with the liquid below. Even their art whispers of aquatic reverence: seals depicting fish and crocodiles, pottery painted with swirling water motifs, and terracotta figurines clutching vessels in perpetual offering. But was this proto-Hinduism? Later Vedic texts venerate rivers like the Saraswati, possibly the Gagahakra, that once sustained the Indus people as goddesses. Hindu pilgrims still immerse themselves in sacred tanks reminiscent of the Great Bath. The parallels are striking, yet the gaps are just as wide. Unlike later Hindu iconography, Indus water symbols lack anthropomorphism: no river goddesses, no serpent deities. Their reverence seems directed at water's physical properties, its life-giving purity, its destructive power when mismanaged. The counterargument comes from anthropologist Steve Farmer, who notes the absence of clear religious artifacts near water structures. No altars, no idol fragments, just engineering perfection. Maybe the Great Bath wasn't a temple, but a Bronze Age public utility with ceremonial side functions, like modern fountains in city squares. Or perhaps their worship was pragmatic, a culture deifying what it depended on most, much like Nile gods in Egypt or rain gods in Mesopotamia. The most radical theory flips the script entirely. Geophysicist Liviu Gioson suggests the Indus people didn't just revere water, they mastered it spiritually through infrastructure. Their cities weren't built near rivers by chance, but at strategic points where seasonal floods could be harnessed yet controlled. In this reading, their wells, baths, and drains were acts of devotion not to a water god, but to the sacred act of taming nature itself. Every brick-lined channel became a prayer, every reservoir an altar. What lingers in these silent structures is the echo of a belief system that might bridge ancient and modern. When a Hindu devotee today offers flowers to the Ganges, they mirror, perhaps unconsciously, the same awe that inspired an Indus artisan to carve a seal showing fish swimming toward a water symbol 4,000 years prior. Whether this continuity is cultural inheritance or universal human instinct remains locked in those unreadable script marks. Until we decipher them, the water cult hypothesis floats tantalizingly between evidence and intuition, as fluid as the element it seeks to deify. Walking through the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro or Harappa, one expectation is conspicuously unmet: the towering temples that dominate other ancient cityscapes. Unlike Egypt's Karnak or Mesopotamia's ziggurats, the Indus Valley offers no grand staircases to the heavens, no stone colossi guarding sacred gates. This absence is staggering for a civilization that left behind such an abundance of ritual objects: seals with divine-looking figures, clay figurines with folded hands, even the enigmatic Great Bath that might have served religious purposes. So where did they worship? The answer might rewrite our understanding of ancient spirituality. One possibility is that their sacred spaces were intentionally ephemeral. Archaeologist Jonathan Mark Kenoyer suggests they may have practiced rituals under open skies or beneath vast banyan trees, leaving no permanent structures behind. This wouldn't be unprecedented. Later Hindu traditions like the Vedic yajnas were performed in temporary fire altars, their sanctity tied to action rather than architecture. Supporting this, some Indus sites show evidence of circular fire pits with residues of ritual offerings like ghee and grains. Perhaps their temples were nothing more than consecrated ground swept away by time. Then there's the home worship theory. Excavations reveal small platforms in Harappan houses, some with collections of figurines and incense burners. These could have been household shrines, mirroring modern Hindu practices where daily puja happens in domestic spaces. The sheer number of terracotta goddess figurines found in residential areas strengthens this idea, but critics point out a flaw: where are the communal sacred spaces? Even decentralized religions usually gather for festivals or collective rites. The Indus Valley's urban planning suggests a highly organized society, yet there's no clear space where that organization extended to communal worship. The most provocative interpretation: we've been looking for temples in all the wrong forms. What if their sacred architecture was so integrated into daily life that we've failed to recognize it? The Great Bath's meticulous symmetry might not just reflect engineering prowess but cosmological alignment. The city-wide drainage systems, with their almost ritualistic precision, could have embodied a spiritual ideal: purity flowing through every street like a man-made Ganges. Even their famed wells, with their artfully tapered bricks, might have doubled as objects of veneration, blending utility and devotion seamlessly. A darker alternative lurks beneath the archaeological record. Perhaps their religious structures were dismantled deliberately. Later cultures often repurposed sacred sites, melting down metal idols or quarrying temple stones for new buildings. The Indus Valley's baked bricks, prized for their durability, would have been tempting targets for reuse. Some Harappan mounds show signs of systematic brick robbing centuries after abandonment. Could the temples have vanished not by neglect but by calculated erasure? The silence of the ruins speaks to something profound about this civilization. While others sought immortality in stone, the Indus people might have found the divine in fleeting moments: a prayer whispered over a hearth, a ritual bath at dawn, a seal pressed into clay as both contract and covenant. Their spirituality, like their script, refuses easy translation, leaving us to wonder if the absence of temples isn't a void at all, but a different kind of sacredness, one that thrived in the spaces between bricks, not just the bricks themselves. Buried beneath the ruins of Harappa, archaeologists uncovered something that shattered assumptions about Bronze Age technology: piles of copper artifacts so precisely made they could have rolled off a factory line. Axes, chisels, fish hooks, even delicate needles, all exhibiting a level of standardization that would make modern manufacturers envious. The real shock. Chemical analysis revealed these objects weren't just similar in shape, they shared nearly identical trace element compositions, proving they came from the same carefully controlled sources. For a civilization without written records, their metallurgical precision speaks volumes. What makes this copper revolution truly baffling is the geography. The Indus Valley sits hundreds of miles from the nearest natural copper deposits, yet somehow they were producing tools by the ton. Recent studies tracking arsenic and nickel impurities point to ore sources in distant Rajasthan and even Oman, suggesting trade networks far more extensive than previously imagined. Imagine caravans winding through mountain passes, loaded with raw ore, or ships hugging the coastline with holds full of ingots, all to feed the furnaces of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa. The scale of this operation implies something extraordinary. The Indus Valley didn't just participate in trade, they orchestrated it with the sophistication of a modern supply chain. Their smelting techniques were equally advanced. Excavations at sites like Lothal revealed furnaces capable of reaching temperatures over 1,000 degrees Celsius, hot enough to separate copper from its ore with startling efficiency. But here's the twist: unlike contemporary civilizations that used bellows, Indus smelters appear to have harnessed natural wind patterns. Strategic placement of vents and chimneys created a draft effect, turning whole workshops into proto-industrial factories. Some furnaces even show evidence of alloy experimentation, blending copper with tin or arsenic to produce superior bronze tools centuries before the technique became widespread. The most puzzling aspect isn't their technical skill, it's the apparent democratization of this technology. While Egyptian copper was reserved for elites crafting golden death masks, Indus Valley copper tools turn up everywhere from granaries to humble workshops. A fisherman's hook received the same metallurgical care as a jeweler's chisel. This egalitarian approach extends to their recycling program. Broken tools were systematically collected and remelted, with hordes of scrap metal found awaiting reprocessing. Yet the ultimate mystery remains: how did they maintain such consistency across vast distances? A copper blade forged in distant Dholavira matches the composition of one from Harappa nearly 600 miles away. No contemporary civilization achieved this level of coordination without centralized control. Yet the Indus Valley shows no evidence of metal monopolies or royal foundries. The answer may lie in their trade networks. Standardized weights found alongside copper goods suggest a system where purity was verified at every exchange point, creating de facto quality control across the civilization. Perhaps their greatest legacy lies in what they didn't do. While others turned copper into weapons, the Indus people overwhelmingly crafted tools for farming, for building, for creating. Their metallurgical prowess didn't serve conquest but community. In that choice, they whisper a radical idea across 4 millennia: that progress need not be measured in blades, but in the quiet perfection of a fish hook that fed a family, or a chisel that shaped a city's future. The soapstone seals of the Indus Valley aren't just puzzles, they're passports to a lost world, stamped with symbols that traveled further than the hands that carved them. Found from the shores of Mesopotamia to the ruins of distant Dholavira, these tiny engraved squares raise a tantalizing question. If we can't read their script, can we at least understand their purpose? The answer might lie not in what they say, but in how they were used. Take their physical design first. Carved from durable steatite, heated to a ceramic-like hardness, these seals weren't fragile keepsakes, they were built to last. Their reverse sides often show deep grooves from cordage, as if worn around the neck or fastened to goods. Some bear polish from repeated pressing into clay, leaving behind what archaeologists call sealings, impressions used to secure jars, doors, or documents. At Lothal's dockyard, such sealings cluster near storage areas, suggesting a system where goods were verified before shipment. This wasn't just art, it was Bronze Age bureaucracy in miniature. Yet their imagery hints at deeper meanings. The recurring unicorn motif, appearing on thousands of seals across 600 miles of territory, can't merely be a trade logo. Such uniformity in a pre-industrial society suggests shared beliefs, not just commercial standards. Some seals depict scenes eerily reminiscent of later Hindu iconography, figures meditating under pipal trees, worshipped by flanking animals. Could these have functioned as portable shrines, their carvings invoking divine protection for travelers and merchants alike? The counterargument comes from distribution patterns. Identical seals turn up in wildly different contexts. One might be found in a potter's workshop, another in a granary, a third buried with a child. If they were religious amulets, why mass produce them with such clinical precision? If trade licenses, why place them in graves? The solution might lie in Mesopotamian records describing Meluhan merchants, likely Indus Valley traders, using distinct seals to authenticate contracts. Perhaps these objects served multiple roles: spiritual talismans for their owners, but official signatures when pressed into clay. Most perplexing are the seals' mathematical consistency. Their average size, roughly 2.5 centimeters square, matches the Indus inch deduced from brick measurements. Even the spacing between symbols follows precise ratios seen in their city plans. This isn't just craftsmanship, it's a system where commerce, identity, and sacred geometry intertwined. When a merchant pressed his seal into clay 4,000 years ago, he wasn't just labeling cargo, he was stamping a universe of meaning into a single square inch of stone. What lingers isn't just the mystery of their script, but the realization that these seals were more than records. They were mirrors of a civilization where the practical and profound coexisted seamlessly, where a trader's signature might also be a prayer and a shipment receipt doubled as a cosmic map. Until we crack their code, each seal remains a locked door, swinging between worlds we've only begun to imagine. The ground beneath the Indus Valley holds layers of secrets, not just artifacts, but the very dirt that witnessed this civilization's unraveling. Recent core samples drilled from ancient riverbeds tell a story of betrayal by the skies themselves. Pollen grains preserved in sediment reveal a shocking shift. Around 1900 BCE, the dominant plant species changed from wheat and barley to drought-resistant weeds. This wasn't just a bad harvest, it was an ecological mutiny. The monsoons, those life-giving rains the Indus people had relied on for centuries, began failing them. Climate models reconstructed from cave stalagmites in Oman paint a terrifying precision to this catastrophe. The same winds that once carried moisture from the Arabian Sea started veering eastward, dumping their rains over the Ganges instead. The Gagga-Hakra River, long thought to be the mythical Saraswati of later Hindu texts, shrank from a mighty artery to a trickle. Satellite imagery shows its ghostly paleochannels snaking through what's now the Thar Desert, dry veins where water once flowed. But here's what's chilling. Geological evidence suggests this wasn't a slow death by thirst. Core samples from Kotla Dihar show layers of fine silt suddenly interrupted by coarse sand, a telltale sign of flash floods eroding now barren land. The Indus people didn't just starve, they watched their world swing violently between deluge and drought. Archaeobotanists studying seed remains found in Harappa's later layers uncover a desperate adaptation. Millet, a hardy crop needing little water, starts appearing where wheat once grew. Stable isotope analysis of human bones tells the same story. Carbon signatures shift as diets move from river-irrigated grains to drought-resistant alternatives. But millet yields half the calories of wheat. No matter how ingeniously they adapted, the math was against them. A child's skeleton from this period shows stunted growth and harassed lines in the bone's physical testimony to cycles of famine. The debate among scholars isn't whether climate changed, but how it felled this civilization. The collapse camp points to Lothal, where the dockyard was abruptly abandoned with artifacts still in workshops. At Kalibangan, fire-scarred buildings and unburied skeletons suggest a sudden crisis. Yet other sites like Rakhigarhi show gradual shrinkage over centuries, streets abandoned one by one, crafts becoming cruder. The truth may lie in between. River shifts could have shattered trade networks first, making copper and tin scarce for tools. Then came crop failures, forcing dispersal into smaller villages. By the time the last cities emptied, the civilization had already fractured beyond recognition. What makes this haunting isn't just the scale of disaster, but its eerie relevance. The Indus people thrived in conditions similar to today's climate change hotspots, semi-arid regions fed by fickle rivers. Their cities were marvels of hydraulic engineering, yet even they couldn't outlast the sky's betrayal. As we stare down our own shifting climate, their ruins stand as both warning and puzzle. How much ingenuity can any civilization muster against a planet that stops cooperating? The Indus answer lies in those layers of silt and sand, a story without words, written in the dirt of a world that dried up. Rising above the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro stands a structure that would make any ancient city planner envious, a sprawling granary complex capable of storing enough grain to feed a population rivaling modern-day small towns. Measuring an astounding 50 meters long and 20 meters wide, with raised platforms and intricate ventilation channels, this wasn't just a storage facility, it was an agricultural command center. Archaeologists estimate its capacity at nearly 4,000 cubic meters, enough barley and wheat to sustain 40,000 people for months. But behind these impressive numbers lies a deeper question. Was this a symbol of abundance or a last-ditch defense against catastrophe? The engineering alone speaks volumes. Elevated platforms kept grain dry during floods, while carefully spaced air ducts prevented mold, techniques some traditional warehouses still use today. The granary's location near the city center suggests careful planning, not an afterthought. Yet what truly baffles researchers is the system's uniformity. Identical granaries appear in Harappa, Kalibangan, and Lothal, all following the same blueprint despite being separated by hundreds of miles. This level of coordination implies more than local initiative. It points to a civilization-wide approach to food security, unlike anything seen in contemporary Egypt or Mesopotamia. Some scholars argue these granaries were proof of a benevolent administration, a centralized authority ensuring no citizen went hungry. The absence of palace structures or royal tombs suggests leaders who invested in public welfare rather than personal glorification. Supporting this, the granary's distribution matches residential areas, implying equitable access. But others see a darker possibility. Sediment cores from nearby lakes reveal periods of abrupt climate fluctuation right when the granaries reached their peak size. Were these warehouses actually emergency reserves for droughts we now know devastated the region? The rationing theory gains traction from Mesopotamian records describing grain shortages in Meluha, the ancient name for the Indus region. A clay tablet from laments failed deliveries, blaming the fields that no longer answer. If the Indus Valley faced similar crises, their granaries might represent not prosperity, but resilience in the face of ecological collapse. Supporting this, some storage rooms show evidence of controlled distribution, sealed compartments with uniform quantities, suggesting careful allotment rather than open access. Yet the most provocative clue comes from the granaries themselves. Unlike Egyptian silos that fed pyramid builders or Mesopotamian storehouses tied to temple economies, the Indus facilities lack clear elite associations. No inscriptions credit kings, no artwork depicts overseers, just meticulously stacked bricks and centuries of grain dust. This silence might be their loudest message, a civilization that prioritized collective survival over individual power, leaving behind not monuments to rulers but empty chambers that once held the hopes of thousands. Whether born of foresight or desperation, these granaries stand as a testament to a society that understood one undeniable truth: no city outlasts its hunger. Among the most touching discoveries from the Indus Valley aren't gold treasures or grand monuments, but tiny clay carts with functional axles, miniature bulls that nod their heads, and charming little whistles shaped like birds. These weren't ritual objects or trade goods, they were toys, carefully crafted with movable parts and whimsical designs. They represent humanity's oldest known playthings, and they whisper secrets about a society that valued childhood in ways we're only beginning to understand. Take the carts, for instance, found in various sizes, some small enough to fit in a child's palm. Their spoked wheels still spin after 4,000 years. What's remarkable isn't just their durability, but their universality. Identical models appear in Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, and distant villages, suggesting toy-making was a widespread craft. Some carts even show wear patterns from being pulled along dusty floors, their axles smoothed by tiny hands. This wasn't mass production for utility, it was mass production for joy. Then there are the animal figurines, not stiff statues, but playful creations with swiveling heads or dangling limbs. A particularly endearing example from Lothal features a goat with a wobbling neck, designed to bob when tugged by a string. But the real showstoppers are the whistles. Crafted with an artisan's precision, these produce clear, bird-like chirps when blown, their acoustics fine-tuned by internal chambers. One duck-shaped whistle from Kalibangan still sings when tested today, its pitch uncannily mimicking a living waterfowl. What do these toys reveal about Indus society? First, that childhood was recognized as a distinct phase of life worthy of specialized objects, a radical notion in an era when children often joined adult labor early. The sheer variety implies age-specific designs, rattles for infants, pull toys for toddlers, intricate figurines for older kids. Even more telling is where they're found not just in elite quarters, but in modest homes and workshops alike. This was a culture where play crossed social boundaries. The toys also hint at a surprising gender neutrality. Unlike later civilizations that gendered dolls versus weapons, Indus artifacts show no such divide. Both carts and figurines appear in context, suggesting all children had access to the same types of play. Some scholars argue this reflects a broader societal equality, echoing the civilization's lack of militarized artifacts or obvious class divisions. Perhaps most poignant is what these objects lack any trace of violence. No clay swords, no toy soldiers, not even aggressive animal poses. The figurines depict peaceful creatures, the carts mimic trade wagons, not chariots. In a world where contemporary cultures glorified conquest, the Indus Valley seems to have cultivated imagination over domination, cooperation over conflict. These fragile clay artifacts carry a weight far beyond their size. They tell us of a society that nurtured creativity, that saw value in laughter echoing through brick-lined streets. When a Harappan artisan shaped a whistle or a wheeled toy, they weren't just crafting an object, they were preserving the most universal human language, the sound of play, unchanged across 40 centuries. The toughest puzzle in the Indus Valley bead industry isn't the artistry, it's the holes. Picture this: delicate carnelian beads, some barely larger than a grain of rice, each pierced with a perfectly cylindrical hole just 1 millimeter wide. Modern jewelers using diamond-tipped drills still struggle to achieve such precision, yet these artifacts date back 4,000 years. The mystery deepens when you examine them under magnification. The boreholes show no tool marks, no telltale striations from copper or bronze. Whatever they used left surfaces smoother than most contemporary methods can produce. Experimental archaeologists have spent decades trying to crack this ancient technique. Early attempts assumed they used bow drills with copper bits and abrasive sand. The results: jagged holes full of microscopic fractures, nothing like the originals. Then came the breakthrough at Purdue University, where researchers tested an unexpected tool: hollow bamboo shafts infused with emery powder. Bamboo's natural silica content makes it harder than copper when heat-treated, while its fibrous structure holds abrasive particles in perfect alignment. A team discovered that twirling these bamboo drills at high speeds, possibly using a flywheel mechanism, could replicate the Indus bead's signature smoothness. But the real shocker came from India's National Institute of Design, where artisans attempted an even wilder theory involving ultrasonics. By mounting a copper tip on a vibrating reed and suspending it in an oil-abrasive slurry, they achieved eerily similar micro-polishing inside the holes. Could the Harappans have stumbled upon harmonic vibration principles? Ancient texts from neighboring cultures mention singing drills, though no direct evidence survives in the Indus Valley itself. The manufacturing scale boggles the mind. Workshops in Lothal produced tens of thousands of these beads annually, with quality controls so strict that rejects were melted down for glassmaking. Chemical analysis shows they sourced carnelian from Gujarat's distant mines, then transported rough stones to urban centers for precision work. Some beads traveled even farther. Mesopotamian royalty coveted them as luxury imports, with cuneiform receipts detailing shipments of Meluhan stone that laughs when pierced by light. What makes these tiny artifacts truly revolutionary is what they imply about Indus technology. Bead drilling wasn't a specialty craft, it was standardized. Microscopic wear patterns on drill bits from multiple cities match exactly. suggesting trained technicians followed identical protocols across the civilization. This wasn't just skilled labor, it was Bronze Age nanotechnology, achieved through generations of perfected knowledge now lost to time. Modern jewelers might use lasers for such precision, but the Harappans had something better: patience. Experimental work shows each bead could take 8 to 10 hours of continuous drilling, with artisans likely working in shifts. The absence of magnification tools suggests they relied on tactile feedback, feeling the drill's harmonics change as it broke through the stone's inner layers. Perhaps the most haunting detail comes from failed experiments. When researchers tried rushing the process, heat fractures ruined every bead. The original artisans clearly understood this. Residue analysis reveals they used water or oil as coolant, stopping every few minutes to let stones rest. In that simple act, the willingness to slow down for perfection, we glimpse a civilization that valued craftsmanship over speed, quality over quantity. Their beads weren't just decorations, they were miniature monuments to the human capacity for precision, each perfect whole a silent challenge across 40 centuries. Of the thousands of seals unearthed from the ruins of the Indus Valley, one motif appears with such relentless consistency it demands explanation: the enigmatic unicorn. Carved into over 60% of all recovered seals, this stocky, bull-like creature with a single curved horn dominates their artistic output like no other symbol. Yet here's what's truly baffling. While neighboring civilizations from Mesopotamia to Egypt filled their art with griffins, sphinxes, and other hybrid beasts, none depicted anything resembling this particular creature. The unicorn's monopoly over Indus imagery isn't just unusual, it's a cultural obsession without parallel in the ancient world. Delving into its possible origins reveals a web of tantalizing connections. Some scholars point to the Rig Veda, composed centuries after the Indus decline, which describes a fearsome one-horned beast called the Rishya. Later Hindu texts reference Ekashringa, literally single-horned creatures associated with cosmic power. Even more striking are parallels in Chinese mythology, where the Qilin, a benevolent unicorn-like being, emerges in the Zhou dynasty. Could these be distant cultural echoes of the Indus symbol, carried along trade routes or preserved in oral traditions? The timing is provocative. The Qilin first appears in Chinese art around 1000 BCE, roughly 500 years after the Indus cities emptied, leaving a gap just wide enough for stories to migrate. But the plot thickens when we examine the unicorn's posture and accessories. Unlike the dynamic animal combat seen on Mesopotamian seals, the Indus unicorn invariably stands passive beside what archaeologists call a standard, a mysterious object resembling an incense burner or feeding trough. This rigid composition hints at ritualized symbolism rather than naturalistic art. Some researchers suggest the standard might represent a yupa, the sacrificial post from Vedic rituals, linking the unicorn to later Hindu practices. Others propose it's a weight measure, transforming the scene into a commercial contract stamped with divine approval. The biological angle raises even more questions. Ancient artists rarely invented creatures wholesale. Their mythical hybrids usually combined real animals' traits. The Indus unicorn's body mirrors the aurochs, an extinct wild ox revered across ancient cultures. Its single horn could represent deliberate exaggeration, like the twin horns of Mesopotamian bull gods gilded to emphasize divinity. Intriguingly, a handful of two-horned bulls appear on Indus seals, often in near-identical poses beside the same standard. This suggests the unicorn may not be a separate creature at all, but a symbolic representation of bovine power distilled to its essence. What truly sets the Indus unicorn apart is its democratic ubiquity. Unlike Egyptian sphinxes reserved for pharaohs or Mesopotamian Lamashu guarding palace gates, these unicorn seals turn up everywhere, from granaries to graves, workshops to wells. This wasn't elite iconography, it was a shared visual language permeating all levels of society. The sheer volume of near-identical finds implies mass production at an industrial scale, with artisans replicating the image countless times over centuries without significant variation. Such uniformity in a pre-industrial culture hints at something deeper than commerce, perhaps a unifying belief system where the unicorn functioned as both spiritual anchor and societal glue. Yet the silence surrounding its meaning persists. Unlike later unicorn myths loaded with allegory purity in medieval Europe, omens in Han China, the Indus version offers no explanatory text or contextual art. Its power seems to have lain in recognition, not explanation. For a civilization that left no surviving temples or royal inscriptions, these tiny stamped images may be the closest thing we have to a collective creed. Every seal pressed into clay wasn't just marking goods, it was imprinting an idea, one so potent it outlived its creators by millennia, even as its original meaning dissolved into time. The real mystery isn't why they chose the unicorn, but why they chose nothing else. Digging through the ruins of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, one absence speaks louder than any artifact: the near-total lack of weapons. Unlike the spear-studded graves of Mesopotamia or the chariot-filled tombs of Egypt, the Indus Valley yields tools for farming, crafting, and daily life, but scarcely a dagger. This peaceful profile takes on new meaning when paired with their profusion of female figurines far outnumbering male representations, and burial practices that show no marked gender distinctions in grave goods. Together, these clues suggest a society where women held stature we'd consider progressive even by modern standards. Take the infamous dancing girl figurine from Mohenjo-Daro. Barely 10 centimeters tall, this bronze woman stands with one hand defiantly on her hip, her head tilted as if caught mid-conversation. Archaeologist Gregory Pashupati notes her unmistakable aura of confidence, a stark contrast to contemporaneous female depictions in other cultures, which often show women kneeling, veiled, or in subordinate poses. Hundreds of similar terracotta figures have been found in domestic contexts, some positioned near what appear to be household altars. While later Hindu traditions would eventually compartmentalize female divinity into rigid archetypes, the mother, the warrior, the destroyer, these early figurines exude an individuality that feels strikingly modern. Burial evidence reinforces this impression. At the Rakhigarhi cemetery, skeletons identified as female were interred with jewelry, mirrors, and spindles, but so were many males. The real revelation came from isotopic analysis of their bones. Unlike in Egyptian or Mesopotamian graves, where elite women show limited mobility, Harappan female remains indicate diets and travel patterns nearly identical to their male counterparts. Some even show signs of occupational stresses associated with carpentry or masonry. This isn't to say the society was perfectly egalitarian. Clusters of wealthier graves exist, but status appears linked to factors other than gender alone. Later civilizations in the same region would take a dramatically different path. When Vedic culture emerged centuries after the Indus decline, its texts like the Manusmriti laid out rigid gender roles, restricting women's property rights and mobility. Archaeologically, this shift manifests in burials where female skeletons are often found with fewer goods, sometimes in peripheral positions to male interments. The contrast couldn't be starker. A civilization that produced bold female figurines gives way to one that penned hymns declaring, "A woman is never fit for independence." What caused this regression? Climate change may hold part of the answer. As drought-stressed resources, societies often retrench into militarized hierarchies, a pattern seen globally. But the Indus case suggests something subtler. Their equality may have been tied to urban prosperity, with granaries ensuring food security and trade networks distributing wealth. Their system likely valued labor over brute strength. When those systems collapsed, so too might have the social structures that elevated women's roles. The most poignant evidence isn't in artifacts or bones, but in absence. Unlike later cultures that memorialized kings and warriors, the Indus Valley left no statues of conquerors, no monuments to male prowess. Their surviving art celebrates fertility, craftsmanship, and daily life, a quiet testament to values that placed community over conquest and perhaps women alongside men as architects of their shared world. The cities of the Indus Valley didn't just hug the earth, they might have been in silent conversation with the stars. Look at Mohenjo-Daro's main thoroughfare, running perfectly north-south with a precision that defies coincidence. Archaeoastronomers measuring its alignment found it mirrors the celestial meridian, the imaginary line dividing the eastern and western skies. This wasn't just urban planning, it was cosmic cartography etched into brick. Similar orientations appear in Harappa's granaries and Kalibangan's fire altars, all suggesting the civilization calibrated their world to the heavens above. Then there's Dholavira's so-called signboard, 10 massive symbols once mounted above the city gates, each nearly the height of a forearm. While most focus on the undeciphered script, astronomer Nandivada Rathnasri noticed something startling. The symbol's arrangement mirrors the pattern of the Big Dipper during the autumn equinox 4,000 years ago. Even more compelling, the board aligns with a series of carved stone sockets in the ground below, forming a crude but functional observational grid. Step on these markers at dawn during certain seasons, and your shadow stretches to touch specific symbols, a potential Bronze Age calendar hidden in plain sight. Critics argue this is pareidolia, seeing patterns where none exist, but consider the evidence. Dholavira's ceremonial ground contains a series of sunken rectangular pits matching the number of lunar months. Nearby, a carved stone slab bears circular depressions resembling early star maps found in Mesopotamian temples. Most telling are the city's solstice markers, strategically placed walls that cast no shadow at midday when the sun reaches its zenith. What makes these celestial clues so controversial isn't their existence, but their implication. Contemporary civilizations like Babylon left detailed astronomical records. The Indus Valley, by contrast, encoded their knowledge in architecture and artifacts, creating a puzzle we're still piecing together. Were their cities giant observatories? Did priests track monsoons by the Pleiades rising, as later Vedic texts describe? Without their words, we're left tracing constellations in the silent language of bricks and shadows, a civilization that may have measured time not in years, but in the slow dance of stars across ancient skies. Among the most haunting artifacts from the Indus Valley are delicate bone flutes. Their finger holes precisely spaced to produce scales that still resonate with mathematical perfection today. These aren't crude noisemakers, they're evidence of a sophisticated musical tradition, capable of producing melodies that could have filled their cities with sound. Yet for all their craftsmanship, these instruments raise more questions than answers. Why would a civilization capable of standardizing weights, scripting seals, and engineering cities leave behind no musical notation, no hymns, not even a single lyric scratched into clay? The instruments themselves are marvels of acoustic engineering. Archaeologists have uncovered flutes carved from bird bones, producing pentatonic scales eerily similar to those still used in South Asian folk music. A set of terracotta rattles from Harappa, filled with dried seeds, create rhythms that sync perfectly with the flute's intervals when tested by modern musicians. Most astonishing are the hourglass-shaped drums depicted on seals. Their tapered ends suggest tuned heads, capable of changing pitch when squeezed, much like African talking drums. These weren't just tools for entertainment, they were precision devices, their designs revealing an intimate understanding of harmonics. So where are their songs? The absence of musical notation is particularly baffling when compared to contemporary cultures. Mesopotamians left cuneiform tablets detailing hymn scales. Egyptians painted musicians with hieroglyphic captions naming instruments and occasions. Yet the Indus Valley's silence on the matter is deafening. One radical theory suggests their music was purely oral, passed down through guilds of professional musicians who guarded their knowledge as trade secrets. Supporting this, some seals show figures holding instruments while standing near what might be notation boards, their surfaces now blank after millennia of weathering. Another possibility cuts deeper. Perhaps their music wasn't meant to be recorded. Vedic texts that emerged centuries later describe sacred sound nada as too ephemeral for writing, something to be experienced rather than preserved. The Indus people might have viewed music as living breath, transient, divine, and utterly inseparable from the moment of its creation. This would explain why the only scores we find are the instruments themselves. There were patterns telling stories of hands that once brought them to life. Modern attempts to reconstruct their soundscapes reveal another layer of mystery. When musicians at Delhi's National Museum played exact replicas of the flutes, the resulting scales contained microtones, notes between Western piano keys, suggesting a musical language far more complex than we assumed. Some sequences even align with the ratios used in their architecture, hinting at a civilization where math, music, and sacred space were intertwined. The greatest clue might lie in what they didn't make. Unlike Egypt's clashing sistrums or Mesopotamia's war drums, Indus instruments skew toward gentle, meditative tones. No cymbals, no brass, just wind and skin and seed. This wasn't music for conquest or spectacle, but perhaps for weaving communities together, note by note. Their silence today feels less like an omission and more like an invitation, to listen not for what was lost, but for what still lingers in the spaces between their artifacts, a song without notation, waiting to be heard anew. What if everything we thought about the Indus script was wrong? A small but vocal group of researchers argues that those intricate symbols found on seals and pottery aren't writing at all, just elaborate accounting marks or clan symbols. At first glance, the idea seems ludicrous. How could a civilization advanced enough to build grid-planned cities produce nothing more than glorified cattle brands? But the theory gains traction when you examine how other ancient cultures recorded information without traditional writing. Take the Inca quipu, for instance, a complex system of knotted cords used to track everything from tax records to epic poetry. To the untrained eye, it's just strings. Yet scholars now recognize these knots as a legitimate three-dimensional language, capable of conveying narratives and numerical data with startling precision. Could the Indus symbols function similarly? Some seals show clusters of signs arranged like modern barcodes, their repetition suggesting inventory counts rather than prose. The infamous unicorn motif might not represent an animal at all, but a merchant's trademark akin to medieval guild marks stamped on goods. The merchant mark theory finds support in Mesopotamian trade records. Cuneiform tablets describe Indus Valley imports arriving with seals of certification, but never mention written correspondence. This aligns with archaeological finds. Seals cluster near storage areas, not administrative quarters. If these were linguistic documents, where are the clay tablets or ostraca with extended texts? The longest known Indus inscription contains just 26 symbols, barely enough for a sentence, let alone literature. Yet the counterarguments are equally compelling. Statistical analyses reveal the script follows Zipf's law, a linguistic pattern where frequently used words appear in predictable ratios, like the in English. Non-linguistic systems like traffic signs don't exhibit this structure. Even more damning for the symbol theory, the script shows regional variations. Symbols in distant Gujarat differ slightly from those in Harappa, just as dialects diverge across geographical space. Merchant marks wouldn't evolve this way, they'd stay rigid for clarity. The most radical compromise comes from computer scientist Rajesh Rao. His team's AI analysis suggests the script might be a hybrid logographic signs like Chinese characters mixed with phonetic elements, used primarily for economic record-keeping rather than storytelling. Imagine a Bronze Age version of emojis mixed with stock codes, functional, but lacking the expressive range of full-fledged writing. what's at stake isn't just academic nitpicking. If these symbols are mere accounting tools, we've overestimated the civilization's intellectual sophistication. But if they're true writing, their refusal to be decoded makes them history's most successful cryptographic puzzle. Either way, the silence of these symbols forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Some doors to the past might remain permanently locked, no matter how hard we press our ears against them. Beneath layers of sediment in Kalibangan, archaeologists uncovered something extraordinary: rows of rectangular pits lined with fired bricks, their interiors blackened by flames and filled with ash. These aren't ordinary hearths, their precise alignment, the charred remains of offerings, grains, animal bones, even traces of ghee, and their proximity to what might have been ceremonial platforms suggest something far more profound: ritual fire altars. But here's where the debate ignites. Do these pits connect the Indus Valley to the later Vedic culture, or do they represent a spiritual tradition entirely their own? The Vedic link hinges on eerie similarities. The Kalibangan altars mirror descriptions in the Rigveda, composed centuries after the Indus decline, which detail sacred fire rituals called yajna. Both feature brick constructions, offerings poured into flames, and even the same ceremonial geometry: rectangular pits for ancestral rites and square ones for divine worship. Most compelling, the residue of clarified butter, a staple of Vedic fire offerings, found clinging to the bricks. For proponents like archaeologist B. Lau, this isn't coincidence but continuity, a proof that Vedic traditions didn't replace Indus spirituality but evolved from it, yet skeptics counter with glaring omissions. The Rigveda's fire altars are explicitly tied to hymns invoking gods like Agni and Indra, yet Indus sites yield no idols, no inscriptions linking these pits to deities. Even more telling, the altars appear in only a handful of cities, absent from giants like Mohenjo-Daro. If fire worship was central to Indus religion, why such patchy distribution? Alternative theories suggest practical uses: communal kitchens for feasting, or even proto-scientific experiments with purification by fire. The most radical perspective comes from anthropologists studying modern indigenous groups in the region. Some tribal communities still use nearly identical fire pits for rituals unrelated to Hinduism, honoring ancestors or marking solstices. This raises a tantalizing possibility. The altars might represent a pan-Indus spiritual language, one that later cultures reinterpreted rather than inherited. What's undeniable is the sophistication beneath the soot. These aren't haphazard bonfires. The bricks show precise ratios matching the civilization's standardized units, and the altar's cardinal orientations hint at celestial awareness. At Banewali, a terracotta model of a fire altar was found, complete with miniature steps and vents, proof these designs were codified, not improvised. The flames that once danced here have long since cooled, but the questions they fuel burn hotter than ever. Were these the earliest sparks of Hinduism or embers of a faith lost to time? The altars refuse to say, their silence as thick as the ashes they left behind. One thing's certain: in the interplay of fire and earth, the Indus people found meaning, whether as a bridge to gods we know or deities whose names we'll never hear. Imagine an economic domino effect stretching across thousands of miles, a single trade route collapsing, then another, until entire cities gasp for resources. This might explain the Indus Valley's mysterious decline. Around 1900 BCE, Mesopotamian clay tablets abruptly stop mentioning Meluha, their name for the Indus region. Shipments of carnelian beads, ebony wood, and ivory vanish from royal inventories. But this wasn't just a lull in commerce. Archaeology reveals something far more sinister. At Lothal's once bustling dockyards, half-finished beads litter workshops, as if artisans downed tools mid-production. In Bahrain, a key trade hub, Indus-style seals appear in layers suddenly devoid of Harappan pottery. The civilization's lifeblood was being cut off, one route at a time, What caused this commercial heart attack? Climate change likely delivered the first blow. As drought parched the Gaga-Hakra river system, overland caravans from the Indus to Mesopotamia would have faced impossible stretches of desert, but the death knell came from the sea. Ocean core samples from the Arabian Gulf show increased cyclonic activity around this period, monster storms capable of smashing wooden fleets. A single Mesopotamian tablet laments, "The Meluhan ships no longer come," blaming the sea that rises like a wall. The economic ripples would have been catastrophic. Without copper from Oman, Harappan metallurgists couldn't produce tools. Without Mesopotamian grain imports to supplement failing crops, urban populations shrank. Most telling are the weights, those perfectly standardized stone cubes that once guaranteed fair trade. Later layers show craftsmen cheating, making lighter weights to stretch dwindling resources. A civilization built on precision was resorting to desperation measures, yet the trade collapse theory isn't airtight. If commerce alone sustained the Indus Valley, why did inland cities like Rakhigarhi decline simultaneously? Some scholars argue trade was the glittering surface of a deeper collapse, like a tree losing leaves while its roots rot. The real tragedy might be how quickly Mesopotamians forgot their once great partners. Within generations, Meluha faded from records, reduced to a half-remembered land of ghosts. The greatest civilizations, it seems, can vanish twice, first in fact, then in memory. The bones don't lie. Modern DNA sequencing has ripped away the veil of time, revealing an astonishing truth. The people of the Indus Valley didn't vanish. They're still here, their genetic legacy pulsing through the veins of modern South Asians. Cutting-edge studies of ancient skeletons from Rakhigarhi and Farmana show something revolutionary. Up to 60% of the genetic makeup of today's Indian subcontinent traces back to this enigmatic civilization. But here's the twist: their DNA tells a story their ruins never could. Unlike the dramatic collapses of Mesopotamia or Egypt, where conquerors left clear genetic imprints, the Indus fade-out was gentler, a slow blending rather than a violent erasure. The real bombshell came when researchers compared Indus genomes to ancient Iranian farmer DNA. The results shattered old invasion theories. There's no genetic evidence of a massive Aryan migration overwriting the population. Instead, the data paints a picture of continuity. Indus people gradually mixing with pastoral groups from the steppes, creating the rich genetic tapestry we see today. Even more telling, the highest concentration of this Indus ancestry appears in Dravidian-speaking communities in southern India and the Baloch tribes of Pakistan, groups often marginalized in traditional histories. Their genes carry whispers of a civilization that refused to die. Now for the million-dollar question: if their cities crumbled, how did their language likely survive? Linguistics offers a clue. The Dravidian language family Tamil, Telugu, Kannada shows striking structural similarities to the Indus script suspected syntax. Computer models analyzing symbol frequency and placement align eerily with Dravidian's agglutinative nature, where words build by adding suffixes. This isn't just academic coincidence. Isolated Dravidian pockets like the Brahui people in Pakistan's mountains, surrounded by Indo-European speakers for millennia, stubbornly retained their tongue like living fossils of a lost linguistic world. But genes and grammar only tell half the tale. Look to the cultural echoes: the worship of buffalo deities in rural Tamil Nadu mirroring Indus seals, the pipal tree's sacred status across Hinduism, even the persistent taboo against eating beef in certain communities. These aren't random holdovers, they're cultural DNA passed down as faithfully as biological traits. The Indus people's greatest achievement might have been crafting a civilization so resilient that even when its bricks turned to dust, its essence endured in the rituals, languages, and very blood of those who came after. Their silence in the archaeological record wasn't oblivion, it was metamorphosis. The towering pyramids of Egypt and the stepped ziggurats of Mesopotamia scream for attention, monuments to gods and kings that pierce the sky in a deliberate show of might. Yet in the Indus Valley, where engineers mastered urban planning and metallurgy with equal brilliance, the landscape remains curiously flat. No stone colossi, no temples reaching for the heavens, just well-laid bricks and quiet streets. This architectural restraint isn't a sign of inferiority. It's one of history's most provocative puzzles. How could a civilization match its contemporaries in every technical respect, yet reject their most iconic forms of expression? Look closer and the contrast becomes even starker. Egyptian pharaohs invested up to 20 years' worth of national resources into single tombs, mobilizing tens of thousands to drag stones across deserts. Mesopotamian rulers inscribed their names into every brick of their ziggurats, stacking them like divine resumes. The Indus elites, by comparison, left no boastful inscriptions, no palaces dripping in gold, not even clear evidence of a ruling class. Their grandest structure, the Great Bath of Mohenjo-Daro, a public facility possibly used for rituals, its elegance lying in subtle proportions rather than sheer scale. This wasn't a failure of imagination. It was a conscious choice, a society that channeled its genius into collective infrastructure rather than individual glorification. The difference might lie in what each civilization feared most. For Egyptians and Mesopotamians, chaos was the ultimate enemy. Their monumental architecture served as bulwarks against the unpredictable Nile floods or the capricious gods of the Tigris-Euphrates. Pyramids symbolized eternal order. Ziggurats were cosmic ladders to appease deities who controlled droughts and storms. The Indus people, by contrast, seemed to have worshipped control itself. Their cities were monuments in miniature, perfectly leveled platforms, standardized bricks, streets aligned to cardinal points, as if they found divinity in precision rather than grandeur. Where others built upward to touch the gods, they may have believed divinity flowed through their sewers and wells, a sacred order embedded in the mundane. Economically, the divergence is equally telling. While Egyptian pyramids functioned as unemployment projects during flood season, and Mesopotamian temple complexes doubled as economic hubs, the Indus Valley's investments were relentlessly practical. The labor required to build one pyramid could have constructed Mohenjo-Daro's entire drainage system 10 times over. Their priorities shine through in survival rates. While Mesopotamian cities frequently crumbled under silt or conquest, Harappan bricks still stack perfectly after 4 millennia. This was sustainability over spectacle, resilience over rhetoric. Yet the most tantalizing theory concerns power structures. Egypt and Mesopotamia left detailed records of god-kings and conquests, their monuments acting as stone propaganda. The Indus Valley's silence hints at something radical: a society that thrived without centralized authority. Without kings to immortalize or wars to commemorate, what need had they for pyramids? Their egalitarianism might explain the uniformity of their housing, the lack of royal burials, and yes, the absence of showy temples. In a civilization where even the humblest neighborhoods had access to clean water, perhaps greatness was measured not by what you could take, but by what you could share. The irony is crushing. While the pharaohs' names echo through history, the Indus Valley's architects remain anonymous. Their legacy isn't carved in stone, but woven into the DNA of every South Asian city that still values function over facades. When modern engineers marvel at their sewer designs or urban planners study their grid layouts, they're paying homage to a different kind of monument, one that whispers across millennia, not with towering boasts, but with the quiet assurance of a society that built for its people, not its ego. The story of the Indus Valley's rediscovery reads like an archaeological thriller, a tale of colonial missteps, stubborn scholars, and a civilization so advanced it shattered historical timelines. It began in 1856 when British engineers laying railway tracks near Harappa stumbled upon strange, uniform bricks. Unknowingly, they pulverized thousands into ballast for the Lahore-Multan line, unwittingly erasing entire layers of history. For decades, these bricks were dismissed as remnants of some forgotten medieval outpost. Then came 1921, when Daya Ram Soni, an Indian archaeologist working under British oversight, peeled back the earth near those same railroad tracks. His trowel struck not medieval pottery, but something far older: seals carved with cryptic symbols, pottery shards bearing designs unseen in any known culture, and the unmistakable grid of planned streets. Initial interpretations were catastrophically wrong. Colonial archaeologists, steeped in biases that placed ancient innovation firmly in Mesopotamia and Egypt, insisted these ruins couldn't predate 600 BCE, a mere blip before Alexander's invasion. The idea that India might cradle a civilization rivaling Sumer was unthinkable to them. But then John Marshall, then Director General of the Archaeological Survey of India, made a radical leap. Comparing Harappan seals to Mesopotamian artifacts mentioning trade with Meluhha, he proposed the unthinkable. These cities flourished alongside the pyramids around 2500 BCE. The academic backlash was immediate. Prominent Egyptologist Flinders Petrie publicly mocked the claim, insisting Marshall had mislaid millennia. Proof came from an unexpected ally: chemistry. When Marshall's team analyzed silver beads from Mohenjo-Daro, they found trace elements matching Amani ores already dated to the 3rd millennium BCE. Even more damning for skeptics, stratified seals at Ur-Bor Indus script, layered securely beneath ruins dated to 2300 BCE. The evidence was irrefutable. By 1924, stunned headlines announced a lost empire of the Indus, rewriting the map of ancient civilization overnight. Yet the excavations themselves were a paradox of revelation and ruin. Early dig methods were brutal: workers bulldozed through layers with picks and shovels, prioritizing artifact extraction over preservation. At Mohenjo-Daro, constant groundwater seepage forced teams to abandon meticulous techniques, leaving behind poorly documented trenches. Later, Mortimer Wheeler's military-style campaigns in the 1940s brought discipline to the digs, but also colonial arrogance. His infamous Aryan invasion theory, imposed on scant evidence, would taint Indus research for decades. The true heroes of this rediscovery were often local laborers and unsung scholars. K.N. Dixit, an Indian archaeologist, corrected early dating errors by identifying pre-Harappan pottery sequences. M.S. Vatt's meticulous documentation at Harappa preserved details British teams overlooked, and it was a young Indian chemist, A.D. Puzalkar, whose analysis of faience beads revealed the civilization's advanced glazing techniques, silencing doubters who'd called their artistry primitive. What makes this rediscovery so poignant is its timing. As India's independence movement gained strength in the 1930s, the Indus Valley became a cultural rallying point, proof that the subcontinent's brilliance predated colonialism by millennia. A single seal, unearthed in 1927 and published in nationalist newspapers, captured the imagination. A seated figure surrounded by animals, dubbed Proto-Shiva, implying Hindu roots stretching back into prehistory. Overnight, archaeology became political, with both colonizers and independence activists weaponizing the past. Today, those early missteps haunt us. Crude excavation methods destroyed stratigraphic clues that might have explained the script. Colonial dismissals of indigenous expertise delayed progress for generations. Yet from this messy, contentious history emerged a truth more astonishing than fiction. A civilization that had mastered urban planning while Stonehenge was still a blueprint, and whose rediscovery forced the world to confront its Eurocentric myths of history. The bricks those British engineers used for railway ballast, they weren't just fragments of a city, they were pavement stones on the road to rewriting human heritage. Deep beneath the shifting sands of the Thar Desert and the murky waters of the Gulf of Kutch, modern archaeologists are racing against time and tied to uncover fresh chapters of the Indus Valley story. At Rakhigarhi, a sprawling site in India's Haryana province, teams wielding ground-penetrating radar have mapped a subterranean metropolis stretching over 500 hectares, twice the size of Mohenjo-Daro. What makes this dig so electrifying are the tantalizing hints of what lies beneath the topsoil, an untouched lower city sealed by millennia of sediment, where excavators hope to find intact buildings with their contents still in place. Imagine opening a Bronze Age time capsule, sealed storage rooms with their original grain, workshops frozen mid-production, perhaps even the elusive script finally preserved on organic materials like wood or leather. Meanwhile, 600 kilometers southwest, marine archaeologists are preparing to dive into history. Sonar scans of the Gulf of Kutch have revealed anomalous structures submerged under 60 feet of water, rectangular formations with right angles too precise for natural geology. These could be the fabled ports of Meluhha mentioned in Mesopotamian records, now drowned by rising sea levels around 1900 BCE. Early dredges have brought up Harappan pottery shards encrusted with marine growth and a tantalizing stone anchor identical to ones found in Oman, where Indus traders established colonies. The real prize would be a shipwreck, a preserved vessel loaded with trade goods, its timbers offering not just artifacts but dendrochronology data to pinpoint the precise years of the civilization's maritime peak. Across the border in Pakistan's Kholistan Desert, French and Pakistani teams are following the ghostly traces of the Hakra River, long thought to be the mythical Saraswati. Satellite imagery shows clusters of potential sites along its dried course, some showing surface scatters of Harappan-era pottery. One promising mound near Ganwariwala, dubbed Little Mohenjo by locals, has yielded seal fragments depicting unknown animals, suggesting regional artistic variations we've never seen before. The dream scenario, a bilingual inscription, perhaps a trade treaty with Mesopotamia, that could finally provide the Rosetta Stone for the Indus script. What ties these disparate digs together is their focus on the civilization's twilight years. While past excavations prioritized grand cities in their prime, these new projects target the peripheries, the smaller settlements, and trade outposts that might reveal how the civilization adapted or failed to adapt to climate change. At Dholavira's sister site, Padri in Gujarat, archaeologists are uncovering evidence of a desperate pivot. Layers where fine Harappan pottery gives way to cruder imitations, then to reused shards patched with bitumen, a society scrambling to maintain standards as resources dwindled. Even more telling are the barley grains found in later strata, smaller and more drought-resistant than earlier varieties, telling a silent story of agricultural triage. The underwater explorations might hold the key to the greatest mystery of all, the role of trade in the civilization's collapse. If the Gulf of Kutch sites reveal sudden cessations of dock activity or half-loaded cargoes, it would confirm that the breakdown of maritime networks delivered the final blow. Conversely, finding evidence of later, cruder attempts at shipbuilding could suggest a civilization fighting to reinvent itself even as its cities emptied. Technology is rewriting the rules of Indus archaeology. At Rakhigarhi, scientists are testing a revolutionary technique extracting ancient proteins from soil samples to identify decomposed organic materials without traditional excavation. This could reveal everything from dietary shifts to the presence of textiles too fragile to survive millennia. Meanwhile, Pakistani researchers are using muon tomography, a cosmic ray imaging method borrowed from particle physics, to peer deep into unexcavated mounds without disturbing a single brick. The most thrilling possibility, connecting these disparate threads into a new narrative. Imagine confirming that the Gulf of Kutch ruins are indeed Lothal's sister port, then tracing trade goods from there to Padri's struggling workshops, and finally to Rakhigarhi's abandoned streets, a tangible chain of collapse preserved across landscapes. With each trowel scrape and sonar ping, we're not just uncovering artifacts, we're assembling the autopsy report of a civilization, one that might hold sobering lessons for our own era of climate uncertainty and globalized trade. The ruins have waited 4,000 years to speak. Now, at last, we're learning how to listen. The Indus Valley Civilization leaves us standing at the edge of a historical cliffhanger, its greatest mysteries still stubbornly unyielding after a century of study. Take their undeciphered script, thousands of inscriptions, some no longer than a grocery list, taunting linguists with symbols that could be poetry, tax records, or something beyond our imagination. Then there's the eerie uniformity of their cities. How did societies separated by hundreds of miles coordinate streets and bricks with near-identical precision, all without evidence of kings or conquest? Even their disappearance defies explanation, vanishing not with fiery destruction, but with a quiet fading, as if they simply walked away from their perfect grid-planned streets. What makes these puzzles so revelatory isn't just what we don't know. It's how they force us to rethink ancient societies altogether. While Egypt and Mesopotamia built pyramids and ziggurats to glorify rulers, the Indus people invested in sewers and communal baths. Their artifacts whisper of a civilization that valued standard weights over statues, water management over warfare, and perhaps equality over empire. In a world where we've come to expect ancient history to be written by the victors, their lack of monuments to power suggests an alternative narrative, one where collective well-being trumped individual glory. The most tantalizing clues may lie ahead. With every archaeological season, new technologies peel back layers we once couldn't penetrate. Ground-penetrating radar reveals buried city blocks at Rakhigahi, while underwater drones scour the Gulf of Kutch for lost ports. Geneticists tracing DNA from Harappan skeletons uncover living descendants carrying this legacy in their very blood. Each discovery chips away at the mysteries, yet for every answer, 3 new questions emerge. So where does this leave us? Perhaps not at an ending, but at a beginning, the starting line of a much longer race to understand. If a civilization this sophisticated could flourish without the trappings we associate with ancient power, what else might we have gotten wrong about humanity's story? What other societies thrived outside our traditional narratives, leaving only fragments for us to piece together? As the sands of the Thar Desert shift and new technologies let us listen to whispers from the past, one truth becomes clear. History isn't just what we've found, it's all we haven't discovered yet. The real question isn't what the Indus Valley can teach us about the past, but how many more civilizations like it might still be waiting beneath our feet, silent and unseen, ready to rewrite everything we thought we knew.